Do you have a loved one who struggles with substance use disorder or other addictions?
That can be hard, right?
Yeah.
Having someone that you love and care about struggling, because that impacts you. And that sounds really selfish for me just to kick things off, but of course you love the person, but thinking about someone who you love, a family member, someone you care about, they're struggling with addiction, that has an impact on your life. And you can really be thinking negative thoughts, can't you? And it can make you not want to talk to that person, talk about the topic, or even withdraw completely from them. And you can be thinking that they don't care about you, they don't care about themselves, they just disregard everything that matters to family anymore.
Yeah,
you can really get negative.
There can be a lot of tension in the family when there's addiction present, right? Family's hard, relationships are hard anyway.
Yeah.
But throw in addiction and it makes it even more complex.
So much more difficult.
I've developed a theory called switch theory, and I've applied it to a lot of different relationships. And so we want to talk about addiction and how this kind of plays out. And so we've got this positive space and negative space.
Okay.
And the positive space is this mental space where we live, where we have hope and optimism, love, expectations that are good for that relationship. And then sometimes when those expectations go unmet, like with an addiction, if someone says they're going to stop and they don't stop, we end up getting in this negative space and we feel just in despair sometimes, unsure what to do.
You lose hope.
We feel like we lose control, we lose hope for sure, and we don't know what to do. And so typically when we're in a negative space, we want to get back to a positive space. Now, in my research at OCU, Oakland City University, I've had students ask individuals, family members of loved ones who struggle with substance use disorder and other addictions, had them ask about their communication patterns.
Okay.
It's been interesting to hear how few people had positive communication.
So this would be family members who have talked to an addicted individual, and you're asking them, how did it go? Did they talk to the person who had the addiction? They didn't want to talk to him oftentimes, right?
So more often the power dynamic played a role. So if it was a parent, the parent would talk to the child, but a child who had a parent who was an addicted individual who struggled with an addiction would be less likely to talk to that parent about the addiction. And so that power dynamic plays a big role, but it also just makes it difficult if you feel like you can't talk about the addiction.
If it feels like it's off limits, then that kind of builds it up to be even worse, and this big negative animal that you can't say anything about. We don't talk about that. Sure. I don't want to talk about it, even if we felt like we could.
Yeah. So how do we get to a positive space? So let's just say that you have a sibling, because a sibling, that power dynamic is more neutral. You have a sibling, they're struggling with alcohol use. They're using, then they don't ever say anything about it. You just see that they didn't come to Christmas or they didn't come to something. And so do you say anything? Do you not say anything? Well, this is kind of going into this theory. We tend to say nothing, oftentimes at first. Sometimes we will just be empathetic, but then over time, the more hurt that we have, the more that we've had unmet expectations, we tend to get in this negative space. So then that's often where we're communicating from. Okay. And so then we're angry, like, you're never around, you didn't come to Christmas, you're always drinking, you don't even care about us. And then that's really ineffective.
That's where explosions come from.
Yes.
Yeah, okay,
and
that's
they feel like, we talked about it one time and it didn't work, and so we just don't talk about it. And so my goal is to help people realize, wow, we're communicating from this place, but if we could communicate from this positive space and maybe earlier, I think that we could have more success.
So if you're in the early stages of it, that would be one thing to tell people, hey, that person who you love and care about who's struggling with an addiction, have the conversation. Talk to them about it. Even if you're worried that their behavior is leading towards an addiction, have the conversation. And even if you've had some bad conversations and you feel like you haven't wanted to talk about it for a long time, there is work that you can do to get into a more positive place.
Yeah. So we can also frame the issue. If you want to talk to the person and you feel like you're kind of in a negative space, but you want to feel positively, you do kind of have some hope. And you might be like, I don't really know where I am. Well, if you're having hope, if you're willing to talk to the person, then I would say that you might be in a more positive space than you realize. And so let's frame the issue. You love the person. You want them to be successful. You both are closer to the same team than you realize. It often doesn't feel that way. But if you can talk from love and hope, then that goes farther. And so talking to them, asking, hey, what do you need? What's worked for you? What isn't working for you? How can I support you as a family member? Those are questions that people tend to not fight with. They're not fighting words. But what happens when we get angry, we feel hurt, we want to be more powerful. And anger makes us feel powerful. Asking, how can I help, makes us feel weak. Or it sets us up to, have to serve the person. People can feel like they're enablers. They're, being asked to just give me money or give me rides or these things. And so it can feel hard to navigate those relationships where we need strong boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good example of how like switch theory works for addiction, because it's so easy to think negative thoughts and then we don't know how to get back to the positive thoughts, especially with something as difficult as addiction. So it's a great sampling of that. You can get even more information about switch theory and why people leave, our course that's online that you can do. It's a great program. We know that you will find benefit dealing with people who are addicted, and different family situations can be really helpful. So check it out at elliotlifecoaching.com.